Really, I think this is an opportunity for us all to share experiences and what's gone well and what could gone better. But I'm also happy to answer questions. So really, just over to you. If you want to raise your hand, we'll take it from there. Inga, you're the first up, so far away, please.
Yeah, my very first question, Pete, is you were doing the visitor surveys. How did you do them? Was that the staff on the ground? Did you use online? Did you use a mixture of both? Or how did you get that information? Not just during COVID, but even beforehand. You were saying you were doing that for the last 5 years, or 5-year-long surveys?
Yeah, Inga, can I just be rude and ask you to introduce yourself as well, so we all know a bit about you? Just a couple of sentences.
Yes, sorry, I'm the Rural Recreation Officer, and I'm joining you from Donegal. So I work on development, management and promotion of trails and trail-based recreation over here. So the staff on the ground, but I am a staff on the ground, but I'm the only one in this position for all of Donegal, which is quite sizable as well. So staffing is a real problem. It's a team of me and I.
So the visitor surveys it coincided with the end of COVID. We have commissioned one survey every 5 years, and it's a commercial survey. It's tendered, and it interviews 2,500 people, and each interview is about 12 minutes long, and it's public data. How much it costs? That survey costs £60,000 each every 5 years. So it's a very expensive survey, but the data we get from that enables us to seriously look at where we need to invest in infrastructure and in people, in what activities people are doing, what their expectation is. And there's some very positives out of that. We have seen people scoring things like the infrastructure work we've done on paths higher. What we identified pre-COVID was a real problem with public toilets. So we were already with partners starting to look at how we could better promote and share what public toilets there were, and that sounds like a small bit of information, but incredibly useful as we came into lockdown, to know that this was going to be a problem and we needed to get it right. But it is, I make no bones about it, it's expensive data, but very, very useful. The other thing we've done in COVID is use the family of rangers in the national park to get their personal experience. It's not statistically valid, but it's good as to what's going on and what they're coming across. And we share that data every 2 weeks with partners. So if we are seeing more camper vans on the ground, we can't tell you how many, but we can say it's starting to grow. So let's get some messaging out there. Hope that's useful.
That's very useful. Yeah, it all comes back to communication, doesn't it? It really does. Cooperation and communication. Thanks.
Fiona, if you just introduce yourself briefly as well, please.
Hi, Pete. I think we've met quite a few times. I'm Fiona Banks from Aberdeenshire Council Ranger Service. Hi, Pete. I do the line management for a team of 6 rangers based across Aberdeenshire, and we work very closely with Pete and the Cairngorms National Park Rangers and the other associated rangers in that area too. One of the things that I'm wondering about, we're seeing a lot more new boots on the ground, and that's fantastic to see, and it's making a huge difference. It's given visitors confidence, communities confidence that we're addressing the issues of the increased visitor numbers that we're seeing. How are we ensuring that the new rangers that are on the ground have a basic training? We lost a lot of senior rangers, we lost a lot more experienced rangers through various redundancies earlier on, and the general lack of investment in ranger services through the year. So we've got a great big bunch of really keen, really enthusiastic new people on the ground. Do we have enough experienced rangers to give them the appropriate training? We used to have Countryside Commission training for rangers coming through, and that gave everybody a basic solid knowledge in the relevant legislation that they needed to know. relevant ID and recording skills that they needed to have, mediation skills that are very important just now, communication skills, interacting with the public, interacting with different age groups, different needs, that type of thing. I think it's something that would be really important to look at from a Scotland-wide viewpoint of getting that basic training for rangers, a recognised qualification. Sorry, that was a 2-minute question, just expanding. So unlike me, sorry.
I think you've raised a key point, Fiona, and I think that's one of the things that as we come out of this this current year, we've seen a vast increase in ranger staff on the ground. We've been fortunate to be able to employ some quite experienced one, but I think the other thing that we've seen, and luckily myself and one of my colleagues have got a past experience in this, is safety management as well. We've got staff working on the ground in potentially some quite challenging situations, late working, late back. So the whole risk management of that has been interesting. And I've seen a gap. I'll be perhaps too open. I've seen a gap in some of my colleagues within the National Park Authority because they've never done that. So I think going forward, there is a whole opportunity to look at training in Scotland for management of people and how rangers input to that.
And I think now we can use technology to do that. You know, before we used to have to go away on residential trips. Now we've got that technology to ensure there's a basic standard of somebody coming into the profession with that. And yet, how do we use technology as well to manage remote and lone working? Yeah,
I think that's a very good point. We employed our seasonal rangers last year with virtual interviews, and the first week of training was virtual. It was a fast learning point for a lot of us as to what works and what could be better. So yeah, but I think that we can now have effective, efficient national gatherings on social media on this kind of video conference.
Thanks.
Any other question? Anyone would like to share? Oh, Cara, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on what Fiona was saying as well. You might not know this, but is there, like in all these discussions, is there any sort of long-term plan about ranger provision going into the future? Just because at the moment there's lots of seasonal jobs coming up. And as Fiona's pointed out, a lot of ranger jobs have been lost and a lot of experience has been lost. So that's a training issue and probably a safety issue for the seasonals. But also those permanent jobs haven't really been replaced. They've been replaced with seasonal jobs to some extent. And I suppose going into the future, it is great that it's been recognised that ranger services probably should have been maintained and should be built back up again. But is that, you know, is that a long-term plan? Is that being discussed, or is it just a wait and see kind of job?
Certainly from a Cairngorm's experience, Cairngorm's information, we have permanently appointed 5 new rangers to the National Park Authority. We previously, there were 13 partners and we grant aid some of those. That's what was inherited when the park was designated. So we are going to maintain a permanent service and we are going to also look at the need for a seasonal service. But I think the question you raise is a very good one, and I don't have an answer. I think the current situation where a range of partners, mainly public sector but not entirely, are employing seasonals is a job done this year. And I think that it's a good point that not only do we need to look at training of rangers going forward, we also need to look at sustainability. There are, certainly within the Cairngorms, there are some positives to being seasonal, that you can do different winter work, but that positive is only there if you're a permanent seasonal, if that makes sense. If you're having to apply for your job every March not knowing it's coming after you've been teaching skiing, then it's not as sustainable as if it's a permanent split post. But I think they're 2 good points that have been raised about training and sustainability permanency. Patrick, you've got your hand up.
Hi, yeah, so I'm actually from Donegal as well, here over in northwest of Ireland. So I've just finished a degree course in outdoor education, and a big part of it is on environmental management. And like that, on the issue of seasonal jobs. That's what I find for myself as well, is that you're always having to reapply for that seasonal position, and there's just, you know, there's no stability to your job, never mind promoting sustainability to anything else. So that's, I just wanted to come in on that point of, yeah, that issue that, you know, it's a seasonal, that overturn all the time, that you're having to fight for your position the next year because you don't know who you're going to come up against in an interview and stuff like that as well. So yeah, just wanted to come in on that point.
Yeah, I think that's useful to know that. And again, one example doesn't mean this can happen everywhere. But Cairngorm Mountain, the ski area in the national park, they have very definitely employed permanent staff with job splits. So they're a countryside ranger in the summer months, and in the winter they did ski patrol. So I think we also need to be creative and pragmatic about the need. If the vast majority of the need is in the Easter to October, then potentially employers need to look at other opportunities for permanent staff. John, you've got your hand up.
John Cuthbertson, Chairman of the Disabled Ramblers. And here in England, we're finding that in order to manage access where wrong sort of things are going on, where people are going on paths illegally, the tendency is to block off the access or restrict it in order to get motorbike stuff, for instance. What it does is completely stop mobility scooters and legal access. Do you have that sort of problem up there, and how do you manage it?
We shouldn't have that problem in Scotland, because under the Land Reform Act, access for the type of vehicles you're describing, mobility scooters, is included in the Act. So we shouldn't have it, but we do sometimes come across locked gates, and the land manager says, well, you can climb over it. But if we choose to push that as the access authority, we can get a solution to it. And I would say the vast majority of times there is an easy solution. Sometimes that involves investment, and we will support that. But the law is on our side in making that work. I think one of the other challenges we face with access for all is getting the information across to the user, which is useful and helpful. Now we've have a couple of leaflets which promote short walks, which we think are accessible to most. But again, you'll know better than me, John, but there's a wide variety in accessibility as well. So I think it's something that collectively we could all do better. The other thing that Scotland, I think, has done well, led by Forestry and Land Scotland, is for low-level paths we have a very simple standard grading scheme which shares with users what they're likely to encounter on that path. It doesn't tell them who it's accessible for. It will use a wheelchair symbol if they think it meets the criteria, but it'll also share with you what type of path it is, if it's bumpy and things like that. And that kind of data, I think, is very useful.
Thanks, Steve.
Fiona.
Hi, so it was just to add what John was asking earlier on. Yep, just to support what Pete was saying, that our access legislation permits mobility scooters around, but one of the ways we've found of managing that is cars are not included under the access legislation, and a lot of the time scrambler bikes and quad bikes are coming in on trailers. So if you can't get into park with the trailer, you can't access the path with the quad bikes. But if you've got a mobility scooter that was in the back of the car, you can still access the car park. So that's one of the ways we can manage it around here. But again, it's like Pete was saying, it's the information describing the path to let then that user work out whether or not they're able to use it. But certainly managing access to car parking with trailers is one way that we found of making sure the path remains accessible to people with mobility scooters, but excludes those that are not using it responsibly.
The lag we have there is that most of our members use very large off-road mobility scooters. Can go up to the top of the Cairngorm, and they go on trailers. So basically, you're stopping people using mobility scooters.
Yeah, we would need to look at that. That came through to us. We would need to work with likes of yourselves to find a solution to a problem like that.
Yeah, pretty intractable, really.
One of the options that I used to manage Lockall Meadows Country Park in Fife, and one of the options there was that we had situations where keys could be provided to users, but it's not a straightforward, easy solution, because you then need to manage that. But yeah, I think you've raised a real challenge. Is how do we make access for all work, but not access for bikes and cars?
Yeah, I mean, we have kissing gates that can be opened with a radar key, and that's useful. And you can have a radar padlock go around a gate. You have a series of padlocks in series if necessary. So things can be done. Yeah, it's just very difficult.
Sorry, we haven't got a simple answer. It suggests there are some challenges going forward. JWM, if you'd like to introduce yourself and ask your question.
Good morning. I'm only appearing as initials, but my name is John Mackay. I started in this business about more than 50 years ago, but at a time when there was a degree of panic also as at present, and that arose at the time when public mobility was growing considerably back in the late 60s and into the 1970s. And my first employment was with the Countryside Commission, and then onwards to SNH and then retirement. But in beginning in this area of work, I was involved largely in Lochaber, and I thereby became the first ranger on Ben Nevis, which is very good for keeping me fit, of course. Now, I'm interested in a general sense, just looking back, because obviously I'm retired many years, and I saw the subject on the list and I thought this is of interest, the expansion or the going back in a sense of beginning to address the issues of open air recreation management. And now all this has started of recent in what you might call the high end of beautiful. And I wonder to what extent the grand strategy has visions for those parts of Scotland where most people live.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't have an insight into what's happening in Glasgow, Edinburgh, and the area between the two, which is high population and an equal need for getting out into the countryside. So no, I don't have any insights. Our connections in the Cairngorms are with the adjacent local authorities, all of which have increased their ranges, but I don't know what's happening in urban Scotland, sorry. But a very good point. I don't know if anyone else can add anything to urban areas and how they're managing for visitors in the close by countryside.
I raise the issue just simply because it has also suffered, and perhaps harder in some of the rural areas, in the loss of finance and staff. Yeah,
well, let's bring that up. I've just got a warning. I think we're about to return to the main room. So I think the things that for me have come out of this is the need to train and maintain rangers, and also to look at them not only in a countryside context, but in an urban context as to how they can encourage safe, responsible access for people in cities and urban areas. No other questions?
I think John's going to pull us, or Jane's going to pull us back very soon.
Okay.
Might we just ask you a quick question? Amongst staff, is there much thinking with regards to e-travel, or is it still predominantly about increasing the capacity of car parks?
No, we're very, very wary of increasing the capacity of car parks, and what we are looking at certainly in the next 5 years is how we encourage much more active travel